Today, I'm going to show you the best way to build a pie chart in DaVinci Resolve that looks really good, is easy to customize, and lets you change the data later on. This is part 2 in the chart series, so check out the last video if you want to learn how to build a Parliament chart, and leave a comment with what type of chart you want to see me build next. We're going to be building this with a bunch of simple but extremely powerful expressions in DaVinci Resolve, so that way we can change it later on. We can have it all animate based on one slider, and just set it up in a way that's really easy to use. I know expressions tend to scare people away, but they really shouldn't because they just make your job a lot easier. Now, if you want to save more time and just have these charts pre-made for you, check out my charts and graphs pack link down below, but we'll talk more about that later. For now, let's talk about building a pie chart. So here in Fusion, we have the chart that we're going to be making. You can see it animates on, it has a few different pie slices, and the really cool part is that the text will actually follow with the pie chart animation. And the cool part about this is there's only 2 keyframes controlling this entire thing. So if we look at the custom tool right here, the animation slider is what's going to be actually animating this. And then we have all of these controls, which is going to let us program what the chart says. So if I wanted this number to go up, I can just grab number in 1, drag this up, and you can see it's going to reprogram all of the data values so that way it still fits within the chart. All right, back on the edit page though, I'm going to come up to the effects and grab a Fusion composition, and we're just going to start from scratch. The first thing we need to do is make the foundation, and in this case, that's going to be that custom tool. So shift space, add in the custom tool, and we're going to do this before doing anything visually. So this tool allows us to have a bunch of just blank controls that we can customize, we can link to with expressions. And so over on the config tab, we can choose what's visible. So in this case, I don't want any of the point controls, so I'm just going to disable those. And I also do not want any of the LUT controls. So now when I go back to the controls tab, you can see we're just left with these 8 sliders. For my pie chart, I want 5 slices, so I'm going to use numbers 1 through 5, and then I also need to keep numbers 7 and 8 for some of the other back-end stuff. So in this case, I'm just going to come to the config tab, and then I'm going to turn off number in 6. Now for number in 7, I'm going to rename this to total, and for number in 8, I'm going to rename this to animation. And if you'd like, you can come in here and rename these to like slice 1, slice 2, whatever it might be. And the other thing to mention is if you want to go beyond this and have more than just those 8 controls, you can use the edit controls to add in your own controls to this node. The custom tool just gives us a really good starting point because that way you can do a couple of different slices without having to do that. Now for the total, we need to add up the value of all of the controls so that way we can divide against the total, and that way we can figure out how big each one of the slices needs to be. So let's first put in some numbers. I think all of that will add up to 1, but on the total, we're going to right click and use our first expression. And so in here, I'm just going to grab the pick whip, drag this up, and drop it on number in 1. You can see it's going to reference that. And what I like to do is just copy the number in section, Control C, and then I'll do plus, paste this in, and then just type 2. I'll do the same thing, plus, paste this in 3. And I'll do this for all of them. So I need to do 5 slices, and when I press enter, this should add up to 1. Now it doesn't need to add up to 1, but that just makes the math easy because that way I know 0.2 is going to be 20%. But anyways, we got that part done. We can actually start building the pie chart now. And the way that this is going to be set up is using ellipse nodes because we want a circle. Fancy that. We're going to build out the first slice with this node, and then we can just copy this and paste it, change a couple numbers, and that way it's actually really fast to build out a pie chart like this. What I want to be able to do is cut out sections of the circle and sort of do like the Pac-Man effect like we talked about in the last video. And the way we're going to do that is exactly the same. I'm going to uncheck solid, add some border width, and then I'm going to right click on the width, do expression, and connect this to the border width. I'll come down to the height, right click, expression, and then also connect this to the border width. And now this is going to change the size of the circle. And if I come down to the length and drag this back and then turn the cap style to be flat, you can see we can choose how big each one of these slices are going to be. Now in the case of the pie chart, I don't want it starting off to the right, and I definitely don't want it to be going counterclockwise. So what we can do is some math in this position control to get it to start from, right up here and then have it go clockwise instead of counterclockwise. So the way we do that is we figure out, we find the origin edge, which is basically going to be this section right down here. It's whatever does not move when we move the length. And then we move the position until that origin edge is where we want it to start. So that'll be 0.25, it's gonna be straight up and down. Now what we do is come into the position, right click, come down to expression, and we're just gonna subtract right length. And if you don't wanna type that out, you can just grab the pick whip, drag this down onto the length control, and that way it adds it in. So now it's gonna start from that 0.25 value that we set, but as we add to the length, it's gonna also move the position, so that way it looks like it's starting from the top and then moving clockwise. Really cool. And now what we need to do is make this length control automatic based on what we set in the custom tool 1. So if I right click in here, come down to expression, I'm gonna write custom tool 1 dot number in 1. And so what that's going to do is pull in that 0.2 value, which in this case is going to be correct, but we want to set it up so it compares it against the total, so that way everything is relative. You know, if I add a little bit to one, it doesn't break the chart entirely. And the way we can do that is just by coming in here. I'm going to copy this entire expression and then divide by, paste this in, and switch this to be number in 7. And number in 7 is going to be the total control. So even as I move this back and forth, what it's going to do is update it to make sure that this slice is as big as it should be compared to all of these other values. Let's grab a background node, we'll connect the ellipse and plug it into here, and this way we can come to the color and give it something like a red. And if you don't want to go through all of the setup and use all these expressions, I have a solution for you that's really fast, it works really well, and has a ton of customization. So for my charts and graphs pack, I'm just going to grab pie chart 1 and drag this down onto the timeline. And when I press play, you see we have a really nice looking chart animation that has the numbers, that has labels, a bunch of different colors. It's really cool. The nice thing about this, to add in more data points, you just have to drag the value slider up, and as you can see, it's going to add in a bunch more. You have a bunch of controls for choosing how these values are actually interpreted. If we come down to the pie section, we can change this from a combined to a separated, and even use a petals option, which sets the entire size of each one of these slices based on their value. And then we have the option to change the colors for the slices. We can explode some of those out. So if we're talking about natural gas, we can use the push, we could scale this up, make it a little bit larger. And these are all keyframeable, so you can come in here and add even more options on top of just the default animation that it comes with. And speaking of the beginning animation, we can use something like sweep, which is going to be a lot closer to what we're making in this video, but you could also do something just as simple as a fade. And this tool is completely powered by the Anim engine, so that way we can change how long animations are going to take without having to use any keyframes, and all of this works from the edit page. And it also has motion blur that just renders really fast and looks really good. So if you want to get this chart as well as 9 other chart types, check out Charts and Graphs on my website. Let's get back to the video. Now, before we duplicate this slice and just make a bunch of them right away, I also want to set up the text so that way we don't have to rebuild that one every single time. So if I grab a text node, we're going to merge this over the background just by connecting their outputs together. And when I view the merge and put some text in, we'll be able to see that over the shape. And now we just need to put a few expressions into the text so that way it shows the correct number and shows up in the right spot. And I want to point out for this, I do have a free expression cheat sheet on my website that's linked down below. And as you can see, it just has a bunch of the different DaVinci Resolve expressions. It has a really nice node name replace feature, so that way you can just copy these, paste them in without making any more changes. Yeah, it's a free resource. It's a great way to learn expressions and see all of the cool things that Fusion can do. But the one I want to look at is under the Math tab, and that's going to be the ceiling function. So what that's going to do is look at something like a number like 1.8, and it's going to round it up to be 2. So what we're going to do is come over to the ellipse tab. We're going to grab the same expression that we're using on the length, and on the text, we can right click, come down to expression, and then paste this in. But we want to make this into a percentage number. So in this case, it should be 20%. So in here, we're going to multiply by 100 to move the decimal point 2 places off to the right. And what that'll do is give us the number 20. And now we want to add in a percentage sign to the other side. If we look on the expression cheat sheet, this kind of helps with it under the text section. Pretty much everything in the text is going to be a string. So what we just made is a string. You know, typing a percent sign is another string. So right here we have these 2 periods, and what this does is it merges multiple strings together. So back inside of our expression at the end, I'm going to do 2 periods, and then in quotation marks, I'm going to add in a percent sign. And what that's going to do is just append that percent sign to the end of our text. So basically what we have is that same write-on expression that we had in the ellipse. We multiplied that by 100, and then we added a percent sign at the end. And so what I forgot to do that I was talking about just before is use that ceiling function. That's going to be really important, especially when we're using different numbers in the custom tool. And the next thing we want to do with the text is make sure it shows up about right here in the slice. But we don't want to do this manually because that means we'd have to do it for all of the different pie slices. And then if we change the value, the text is going to be at the wrong spot. So we can make this automatic using an expression. And what we'll do is come over to the layout tab, come down to the center X and Y, right click, come down to modify width, and then use vector result. So what a modifier is it just adds some more controls to that control to make some stuff easy. And what this one does is it allows us to choose the distance that we want to move the text and the direction that we want to move the text. In this case, I'm just going to set the distance manually, and then we're going to use an expression to set the angle. Just like we did with the ellipse, let's find the starting point of the rotation. So in this case, that is going to be 90 degrees. Now, if you right click on the angle, come down to expression, we're going to start with 90, and from this, we're going to subtract ellipse1.right length and then multiply that by 180. And so the reason we have to multiply it is if back on the ellipse, this is in a 0 to 1 system, where on the text in the vector result modifier, this is a 0 to 360 system. And then the reason we're not just multiplying by 360 is because we only want half of it. So instead of doing multiply by 360 divided by 2, we're just going to do multiply by 180 just to make the expression a little bit simpler. And something really cool we just did with the setup is we're referencing the ellipse control. So if we animate this control, the text is is also going to be animated. So we're kind of killing two birds with one stone with that. Let's set up an animation just so you can get an idea. So on frame 0, I'm going to add a keyframe on the animation slider at 0, and then let's say frame 40, I'll add a keyframe with it at 1. Now in the spline tab, I'm going to select the animation, select these, press F, and then I'm going to use T to open this easing menu to add in a bunch of easing. Now in the ellipse node, I'm just going to come to the length, go all the way to the end, and multiply this entire thing by custom tool 1.number in 8. And when I press play, you can see the shape's going to animate on and the text is going to move so it's always in the center of the shape. And to fix the issue of the text showing up outside of the shape, in the merge node, we're just going to set the operator mode to be a top, which means it's only going to show the foreground input, which is the text, on top of the background input, which is the slice. Now, the other thing we're going to do is add in an opacity animation. And the reason we're going to do that is because when all of the pie slices get really small, they're all going to be right next to each other, and you'll just see that like little white band through the center because all the text is still visible. I don't like that, so I like coming over to the shading tab, right-clicking on the opacity, doing expression, and then just linking this to custom tool 1.number in 8. That way the text is fading on, the slice is moving, and the text is staying centered. And that's the foundation of the effect right there. So let's copy this, we'll paste it off to the side, and we're gonna make this into the second slice. Basically what this means is we need to come through here and change all of the values. So instead of doing custom tool.number in 1, we're gonna do .number in 2. On the text tab, we have to change the same thing in the text, number in 2. And now if I view this merge, you can see we have a 30% slice of the pie chart because that is what number in 2 is set to. This still isn't right though. We should also change the color just so that way it stands out a little bit more. But this still isn't right because it's starting from the same spot that the last one did. So we need to offset it by that amount. To fix this, in the ellipse node, we're just gonna come to the position and then subtract ellipse 1.right length. And so basically what we're doing is taking how big the last slice was and offsetting this slice by that amount. So when I press enter, you can see that's gonna move down and now I can see both of those slices. It's still not quite right though because the text has not had that same offset. So under the modifiers tab, right after 90 degrees, I'm just gonna subtract ellipse 1 and do .right length. And this does pretty much nothing to fix it because again, this is a 0 to 1 control and we're using this in the 0 to 360 control. So since we don't want to divide this one in half, we're just gonna multiply this by 360. And now as you can see, both of these are gonna animate, the text is gonna line up, and it's just gonna look really good. Instead of just copying and pasting the first one every time, I always wanna copy the last one that I made. So I'm gonna copy the second group, paste this, and then merge this over. The easy ones are the same, that is come in, change number in 2 to number in 3. But then when I'm doing the offset expressions, you can see I already have it starting after the first slice. So inside of the ellipse, I can just come in here and then at the end, I will subtract ellipse 1_1.right length. And now this slice is gonna be starting after the second one. And same in the text, I'm gonna come up to the modifiers tab. And what I like doing for this is putting the ellipse 1 in parentheses, because whatever's in here then gets multiplied by 360, and I don't have to do multiply by 360 5 different times. And so when I have this in parentheses, I'm actually going to add and then do ellipse 1_1.right length. And just like that, that one is showing up correctly. So I'm gonna do that 2 more times. And that's how you build a pie chart in DaVinci Resolve. And remember, choosing the right type of chart is just as important as building the chart itself. So check out my video on the Parliament chart. Let me know what charts you want to see in the future, and also check out the charts and graphs pack so that way you can save a ton of time building these charts, and then it's really easy to customize those. So check them out, they're going to save you a ton of time, and I'll see you in the next video.